His name is Ben Gilmore, a combat medic stationed at Firebase Kasara, deep in the protected jungles of the Indo-Myanmar border. Ben lives in a Spartan barracks, surrounded by jungle sounds most people only hear in documentaries. Although the life of a soldier is grueling, it has taught Ben to stay calm when death is inches away. But nothing could have prepared him for this morning. In the barracks, he cleaned his rifle, checked his med kit, and scribbled notes in his worn-out journal. He is not just a soldier, he is a healer, trained to save lives even in the chaos of war. One humid morning, Ben woke before dawn as usual to prepare for a routine patrol. The sun hadn't yet broken through the canopy. The jungle was still draped in mist and shadow. In the cramped kitchen area of the base, Ben was heating water for his instant coffee and gnawing on a ration bar. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed from beyond the perimeter fence. A low, guttural growl, too close, too deliberate. Ben froze, his pulse hammered in his ears. Rangers didn't venture this close to the base. Locals knew to avoid this area. That sound, it wasn't human. He grabbed his rifle and stepped cautiously toward the door. The gravel crunched beneath his boots. The jungle had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, just his breathing and that growl. Then he saw her. Standing just beyond the gate, partially hidden by the morning fog, was a massive Bengal tigress, over 400 pounds of raw, lethal power. Her orange and black coat shimmered with dew. Her amber eyes locked onto his. Ben's blood turned to ice. But she didn't charge. Instead, she did something that shattered every rule of the wild. She lowered her head and stepped aside, revealing something small and still on the ground. A cub, her cub. And it wasn't moving. The tigress released a sound Ben had never heard from a predator before, a whimper, soft, desperate, pleading. She nudged the cub forward with her nose, then looked back at Ben with eyes that seemed to say, "Please save my baby." Ben's hands trembled as he slowly lowered his rifle. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might explode. He glanced at the cub again. Its tiny chest was rising and falling in shallow, panicked gasps. It was choking. Every instinct screamed at him to back away, to radio for help, to run. But the medic in him, the healer, couldn't look away. He knelt down slowly, never breaking eye contact with the mother. He removed his helmet and placed it on the dirt, a gesture of trust. "I'm going to help," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Just don't kill me." The tigress didn't move. She just watched, muscles taut, eyes burning, as Ben crawled toward her dying baby. What happened next is one of the most unbelievable acts of trust between human and beast ever caught on camera. But here's the thing, stories like this almost never get told. Not because they don't happen, but because most people scroll right past them, chasing clickbait and fake drama, missing the real moments that remind us what courage, compassion, and connection truly look like. If you're tired of empty content, if you believe the wildest stories are the true ones, if you want to witness more moments where humanity and nature collide in ways that will leave you breathless, then do not let this story disappear into the algorithm. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because Wildward Bound doesn't just tell stories, we bring you face to face with the untamed, the unbelievable, and the unforgettable. We dig deep into the wild places where heroes don't wear capes, they wear boots, carry med kits, and kneel in the dirt to save a life that could end theirs in a heartbeat. Subscribe now, or you'll miss what Ben did next, and the moment the tiger repaid him in a way that will absolutely shock you. Don't just watch, become part of the Wildward Bound pack. Subscribe now. Because some stories deserve to be remembered, and this one will haunt you forever. The jungle was never truly quiet, except when it wanted you to know you were being hunted. Ben had been walking the dirt road for nearly 2 hours, his boots caked in red mud, his fatigues clinging to his skin like a second layer of sweat. The heat was suffocating, the kind that made your lungs work twice as hard just to pull in air. It pressed down on him from above, rose up from the earth below, and wrapped around him like an invisible predator. But it wasn't the heat that bothered him. It was the silence. The jungle was wrong today. No birds called from the canopy. No insects buzzed near his ears. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ben had done enough patrols through this green zone, a protected wildlife corridor cutting through disputed territory, to know what silence like this meant. Something big was nearby. Something that didn't want to be seen. He slowed his pace, his right hand instinctively moving to the grip of his rifle. His eyes scanned the tree line on both sides of the narrow road. The dense undergrowth could hide anything, wild boar, deer, even the occasional elephant herd passing through. But this didn't feel like elephants. His heartbeat quickened. Sweat dripped down his temple, stinging the corner of his eye. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, never taking his eyes off the shadows between the trees. You're being watched. The thought wasn't paranoia. It was certainty, a primal instinct older than language, older than training, the kind of knowledge your ancestors carried when they were still prey. Ben stopped walking. He stood in the center of the road, rifle half raised, and listened. Nothing. Then a snap. A single twig breaking, somewhere to his left. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, his finger hovering near the trigger, his body coiled tight. And that's when the bushes moved. Not swayed, not rustled. Parted, like a curtain being drawn back by invisible hands. And she stepped out. The Tigress. Ben's entire world collapsed into that single moment. Time didn't stop, it shattered. His mind tried to process what his eyes were seeing, but the sheer size of her made it impossible. She was massive, easily 400 pounds of muscle, fur, and fang. Her coat blazed orange even in the muted jungle light, every black stripe a bold declaration of power. Her shoulders rolled with each step, her paws the size of dinner plates pressing into the soft earth without a sound. She stood less than 20 feet away. Ben couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. Every survival course he'd ever taken screamed conflicting commands in his head. Don't run, don't make eye contact, don't show fear, don't turn your back, don't. The Tigress looked directly at him. Her amber eyes locked onto his, and Ben felt his knees nearly buckle. He'd stared down armed insurgents, walked through minefields, pulled men from burning vehicles, but nothing had ever made him feel this small. This was an apex predator, a creature that had no natural enemies, a living weapon perfected by millions of years of evolution. And he was alone. His rifle felt like a toothpick in his hands. The Tigress took another step forward. Her muscles rippled beneath her fur. Her head was lowered slightly, her eyes never leaving his face. Ben could see the moisture on her nose, the faint rise and fall of her chest, the way her whiskers twitched as she tasted the air. This is it, Ben thought. This is how I die. He'd always imagined it would be quick, a bullet, maybe an explosion, clean, distant. Not this, not torn apart by teeth designed to crush bone. But then she did something impossible. She stopped, and she lowered herself to the ground. Not in a crouch, not in a pounce. She lay down. Ben blinked. His brain refused to accept what he was seeing. Tigers didn't do this. Predators didn't submit. They didn't. The Tigress nudged, something forward with her massive head. Ben's eyes dropped. There, lying in the dirt between them, was a cub. It was so small, so impossibly fragile compared to the mother. Its tiny body was stretched out flat on its stomach, its eyes barely open, its mouth parted in a silent gasp. Its orange fur was matted and dull. And it wasn't moving. Ben's heart lurched. Oh God! The mother tigress released a sound that made his chest tighten, a soft, broken whimper. It was a sound no creature that powerful should ever make, a sound of desperation, of helplessness. She nudged the cub again, her massive head impossibly gentle, then looked back up at Ben. And in that moment, he understood. She wasn't here to kill him. She was here to beg. Ben's hand shook as he lowered his rifle slightly. His mind raced. The cub's chest was rising and falling in rapid, shallow jerks. Its mouth kept opening and closing, like it was trying to gulp air but couldn't get it down. It's choking. Ben had seen it 100 times in the field, soldiers panicking, swallowing wrong, airways blocked by debris or blood. The body's desperate attempt to pull in oxygen when the passage was obstructed. The cub was suffocating. Every instinct Ben had screamed at him to back away, to radio for help, to leave this to someone, anyone else. This isn't your problem, this isn't your fight. But the medic in him, the part of him that had sworn an oath to preserve life, wouldn't let him move. He looked at the cub, then at the mother. Her eyes were locked on his, wide and wet, her body trembling despite her size. She could kill him in 2 seconds, snap his neck with a single swipe, tear out his throat before he even felt the pain. But she was trusting him. A wild animal, a predator, a mother. She was trusting him with the most precious thing in her world. Ben swallowed hard. His mouth was dry. His heart hammered so loud he could hear it in his skull. Run, his fear whispered, run now. Stay, his conscience answered. You're the only chance that baby has. He made his choice. Slowly, so slowly, Ben slung his rifle off his shoulder. The tigress's eyes tracked the movement, her muscles tensing. Ben's breath hitched, but he didn't stop. He placed the rifle gently on the ground beside him. Then he reached up and unfastened the chin strap of his helmet. The tigress growled, a low, warning rumble that vibrated through the earth. Ben froze. Easy, he whispered. Easy, mama, I'm not going to hurt your baby. He pulled the helmet off and set it down beside the rifle. The cool air hit his sweat-soaked hair, and for a moment he felt absurdly vulnerable. No weapon, no armor. Just a man. And a mother. Ben dropped to his knees. The dirt was warm and rough beneath him. He kept his hands visible, palms open, and began to crawl forward. Every movement was slow, deliberate, non-threatening. The tigress watched him like a coiled spring. Her tail flicked once, twice. Her claws flexed into the earth. Ben's throat was so tight he could barely breathe. One swipe, that's all it would take. But he kept moving. Inch by inch. Closer. Closer. Until he was less than 3 feet from the cub. And less than an arm's length from the mother's jaws. He could see every detail now. The way her fangs gleamed white against her pink gums, the flecks of gold in her amber eyes, the faint scars on her muzzle from years of survival in the wild. She could end him. But she didn't. Ben reached out with trembling hands and gently touched the cub's side. Its fur was soft and warm. Its heartbeat was frantic beneath his palm. The mother growled again, louder this time. Ben looked up at her. I know, he whispered. I know, but I have to do this. He turned his attention back to the cub, his medic training kicking in. Airway, breathing, circulation. The cub's airway was blocked. He needed to clear it, fast. He slid one hand beneath the cub's tiny chest and carefully turned it onto its side. The mother's growl deepened, but she didn't move. Ben could see it now. The cub's throat was bulging slightly, something lodged deep inside. Heimlich maneuver, modified for size. He positioned his hands carefully, one supporting the cub's back, the other just below its ribcage. His fingers looked enormous against the cub's fragile body. Please don't let me hurt it, please. Ben pressed inward and upward in a quick, controlled thrust. Nothing. The cub convulsed weakly. The mother's claws dug into the dirt. Ben did it again, harder this time. Still nothing. His pulse was screaming. His hands were shaking. The mother was inches away, her breath hot on his neck. One more time. Ben pressed again, firm, decisive, and something shifted. The cub's mouth opened wide, and a small, hard piece of plastic shot out onto the dirt, a fragment of a discarded bottle cap, sharp-edged and filthy. The cub gasped. A raw, desperate gulp of air flooded into its tiny lungs. And then it cried, a high-pitched, broken mewl that shattered the silence of the jungle. Ben's entire body sagged with relief. Tears blurred his vision. "There you go," he whispered, his voice cracking. "There you go, little one." The mother tigress moved. Ben's heart stopped. But she didn't attack. She stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and lowered her enormous head beside her cub. Her rough tongue came out, and she began to lick the baby's face, her eyes closing in what could only be described as relief. Then she did something that would haunt Ben for the rest of his life. She turned her head toward him, and she licked his hand. Just once, gentle, deliberate. A gesture of trust, of gratitude, of something deeper than words. Ben stayed perfectly still, tears streaming down his face, his hand still resting on the cub's fragile side. For a moment, man and beast existed in perfect, impossible harmony. Ben's hands were still shaking as he reached for his medical kit. The cub was breathing, but barely, each breath a wet, rattling struggle that told him the airway wasn't fully clear. The plastic fragment had been the main obstruction, but there could be more debris, or swelling, or fluid building up in the tiny throat. He needed to work fast. The mother tigress had retreated slightly after licking his hand, giving him just enough space to work, but her eyes never left him. She was so close Ben could smell her, a mixture of earth and musk and something wild that made his primitive brain scream danger with every breath. He unclipped his canteen from his belt with trembling fingers. The movement was slow, deliberate, every action telegraphed. The tigress's ears flicked forward, tracking the sound of metal against fabric. "Just water," Ben whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. "Just trying to help." He unscrewed the cap and poured a small amount of water into his cupped palm, then carefully dribbled it into the cub's mouth. The little one coughed weakly, its head turning to the side. Good. The swallowing reflex was working. Ben set the canteen down and reached back into his medical kit. His fingers found the small pouch containing his forceps, surgical-grade stainless steel, designed for extracting shrapnel and debris from wounds. He'd used them dozens of times on soldiers. Never on a tiger cub. He pulled them out slowly. The metal caught the filtered jungle light, gleaming. The mother's growl was immediate and guttural, a sound that made Ben's blood turn to ice. Her lips pulled back, revealing fangs as long as his fingers. Her entire body tensed, muscles coiling beneath her striped fur like compressed springs ready to explode. Ben froze, the forceps hung in the air between them. "I know," he breathed. "I know it looks bad, but I have to check, please." The tigress didn't move, but the growl didn't stop either. It vibrated through the ground, through Ben's bones, through his soul. He was kneeling inches from the most powerful jaws in the jungle, holding what looked like a weapon, reaching toward her dying baby. One wrong move, one misunderstood intention. That's all it would take. Ben lowered his gaze slightly, not submission but respect. He'd read somewhere that direct eye contact could be seen as a challenge. He couldn't afford to challenge her, not now. Slowly, he brought the forceps toward the cub's mouth. The mother's head dropped lower. Her nose was less than a foot from Ben's throat. He could feel her breath, hot and rhythmic, against his jugular vein, the vein that carried blood from his brain to his heart, the vein that, if severed, would empty him out in under a minute. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost dropped the forceps. Focus, breathe. You've worked under fire before. You've held a man's intestines inside his body while mortars fell around you. You can do this. He gently opened the cub's mouth with his left hand and inserted the tip of the forceps with his right. The cub whimpered, a tiny, heartbreaking sound. The mother's growl intensified. Her body shifted forward. Ben's entire world narrowed to a pinpoint. The forceps, the throat, the blockage. He could see it now. A smaller fragment of plastic, slick with saliva and blood, lodged against the back of the cub's throat. That's what was still restricting the airway. He adjusted his grip, positioned the forceps. His hand was so close to the cub's teeth, to the mother's face, that he could feel the heat radiating from both of them. One chance, don't slip, don't hurt it. He squeezed the forceps closed around the fragment and pulled. Gently, steadily. The cub gagged, its tiny body convulsed. The mother lunged forward, her face suddenly filling Ben's entire field of vision, her mouth open, her roar shaking the air itself. Ben didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He held steady, and the fragment came free. A jagged piece of red plastic, no bigger than a thumbnail, slick and deadly. Ben tossed it aside and yanked his hand back just as the cub sucked in a deep, clear breath. And then another. And another. The cub's eyes opened wider. Its chest expanded fully for the first time. It coughed once, twice, then let out a loud, indignant cry that echoed through the jungle like a bell. The sound was beautiful. The mother froze mid-lunge. Her rage evaporated in an instant, replaced by something Ben had never seen in a wild animal before, pure, desperate relief. She dropped her head beside her baby and began licking it frantically, her massive tongue covering the cub's entire face in one stroke. She nudged it with her nose, checking it over, her eyes wide and glistening. The cub cried again, louder now, stronger, and tried to stand on wobbly legs. The mother rumbled deep in her chest, a sound that wasn't a growl but something softer, something almost like a purr. Ben sat back on his heels, his whole body trembling with adrenaline and relief. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. His hands were still shaking. His face was wet. He hadn't even realized he'd been crying. For a long moment, the only sounds were the cub's soft mewls and the mother's rhythmic breathing. Then the tigress turned her head and looked at Ben. Really looked at him. Her amber eyes, which had been filled with desperation and fury and fear, softened. The tension in her massive frame eased. Her ears, which had been pinned back in aggression, relaxed forward. Ben stared back, unable to look away. There was something in her gaze, something he couldn't name but felt all the way to his core. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was deeper than that. It was recognition, acknowledgement. She saw him not as a threat, not as prey. As an equal. The tigress blinked slowly, then dipped her head once, a single, deliberate nod. Ben's breath caught. "You're welcome," he whispered. The cub stumbled toward its mother on unsteady legs, and she immediately pulled it close with one massive paw, her tongue continuing its inspection. Satisfied, she glanced at Ben one more time, then began to rise. Ben knew what that meant. The moment was over. It was time to go. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, his legs stiff and aching from kneeling. He took a careful step backward, then another, putting distance between himself and the tigers. The mother watched him but didn't follow. The cub nestled against her, already looking stronger. Ben turned and took 3 more steps down the dirt road, back toward the base. His gear was still on the ground, his helmet, his rifle, his canteen. He'd have to retrieve them, but first he just needed to breathe, to process, to. The roar came from behind him, sudden, explosive, and filled with rage. Ben spun around just in time to see the tigress charging directly at him. His heart stopped. Time fractured. Every instinct screamed at him to run, But his body wouldn't obey, his legs locked, his arms useless, his mind blank with primal terror. She was a blur of orange and black, her paws thundering against the earth, her jaws open wide. This is it. She changed her mind. I'm dead. The tigress reached him in 2 seconds. And leaped. Ben felt the wind of her body as she flew past him, so close her fur brushed his shoulder. He stumbled backward and hit the ground hard, the air knocked from his lungs. He looked up, gasping, expecting to see her standing over him. But she wasn't looking at him at all. She was looking down, right where Ben's boot had been a heartbeat ago. Pinned beneath her massive paw, writhing and hissing, was a king cobra, easily 6 feet long. Its hood flared, its fangs bared and dripping venom. It had been coiled in the tall grass at the edge of the road, camouflaged, invisible, waiting to strike. Ben's mind reeled. His entire body went numb. The snake had been less than a foot from his leg. One more step and it would have buried its fangs in his calf. That much venom, that close to his femoral artery, he would have had minutes, maybe less. The tigress snarled and brought her jaws down on the snake's head with a sickening crunch. The snake convulsed once, then went still. She dropped it onto the dirt, then turned to look at Ben. Her eyes were calm, almost amused. We're even, they seemed to say. Ben couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the dead snake and the tigress standing over it. She'd saved his life. She'd seen the danger, calculated the distance, and moved faster than thought itself to repay the debt. The tigress turned away without ceremony and padded back to her cub. She nuzzled it once, then picked it up gently by the scruff of its neck. The cub dangled from her jaws, mewling softly, already looking drowsy. The mother glanced at Ben one last time. Then she stepped into the jungle and vanished. The shadows swallowed her whole, as if she'd never been there at all. Ben sat in the dirt for a long time, staring at the place where she'd disappeared. His heart was still racing. His hands were still shaking. Slowly, he got to his feet. He walked over to where his gear lay scattered in the road. His helmet was on its side, a long scratch carved across the surface, deep and fresh. He didn't remember it being there before. Maybe it had been the tiger, maybe it had been a branch, maybe it didn't matter. He picked up the helmet and ran his thumb over the scratch. Then he smiled. Not a small smile, a wide, disbelieving, awestruck grin that made his cheeks ache. He looked back at the jungle one more time, half expecting to see those amber eyes watching him from the shadows. But there was nothing. Just the trees, the mist, and the faint sound of birds beginning to sing again. Ben slung his rifle over his shoulder, fastened his helmet under his arm, and started walking back down the road. His legs felt like jelly. His mind was a whirlwind, but his heart was light. He had a story now, a story no one would believe, a story that would sound insane no matter how many times he told it. But it was real. He had the scratch on his helmet to prove it, the dirt on his knees, the tremor still running through his hands. And somewhere deep in the jungle, a mother tiger was carrying her cub back to safety, alive because a soldier chose compassion over fear. Ben touched the scratch on his helmet one more time. "Thank you," he whispered to the trees. And he could have sworn, just for a second, he heard a distant, rumbling purr in response. By the time he reached the base, the sun had fully risen. His squadmates were gathered near the gate, rifles slung casually, coffee mugs in hand.
"Gilmore, where the hell have you been?"
One of them called. Ben stopped. He looked down at his filthy uniform, his scratched helmet, the mud caked on his knees. He looked back at the jungle. Then he smiled. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you."